The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It felt like the room was spinning. I stared at Clara, then at Sam, then back at Clara. It couldn't be true. It just couldn't be. I don't understand, I stammered, my mind reeling. My name is Meredith Shaw, and until recently, my life was as predictable as the sunrise. At 50, I was comfortably settled in the small town of Willow Creek. My days were filled with volunteering at the library, tending my rose garden, and preparing dinner for Robert. Robert, my husband, was the town doctor, a respected figure known for his gentle bedside manner and booming laugh. Our marriage, well, it wasn't exactly a whirlwind of passion, but it was solid. We had a routine, a comfortable rhythm. Sunday mornings meant pancakes and the newspaper. Evenings were spent reading in the same room, the only sound the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. We'd been married for 25 years. We weren't the couple who held hands everywhere, but we were content. Our home, a cozy two-story house with a wide front porch, reflected our quiet life. It was filled with comfortable furniture, family photos, and the scent of beeswax polish. We had a lovely garden, and Robert took pride in his vegetable patch. We also had a vacation home by the lake, a place we escaped to during the summer months. Life was good. Robert's medical practice was his pride and joy. He dedicated his life to helping others, and the town adored him for it. He made house calls, knew everyone by name, and always had a kind word for those in need. He worked long hours, but he never complained. He was a pillar of the community, a man of integrity and compassion. Or so I thought. We attended church every Sunday. He was on the board of the local charity. He was the very definition of a good man. That's what made what happened next so unbelievably shocking. It shattered everything I thought I knew about my life, about Robert, about everything. It started with a knock on the door, a young woman with a little boy in her arms, and a secret that would turn my world upside down. The knock was light, almost hesitant. It was a Tuesday afternoon, around 3 o'clock. Robert was still at the clinic. I was in the kitchen, humming along to the radio as I prepared a chicken pot pie for dinner. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to the door. Standing on my porch was a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 25. She had long, wavy brown hair and wide, anxious eyes. In her arms, she held a little boy, maybe 2 or 3 years old. He had bright blue eyes and a shock of unruly brown hair. But it wasn't the hair or the eyes that made me gasp. It was his face. He looked exactly like Robert. A miniature Robert, 20 years younger. The young woman shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Shaw?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded, speechless. "My name is Clara," she said, taking a deep breath. "And this is my son, Sam." She hesitated, her eyes darting around nervously. I need to talk to you. It's about Robert." My heart began to pound in my chest. I knew, instantly, that my life was about to change forever. "Please, come in," I managed to say, my voice trembling slightly. I led them into the living room and gestured for them to sit on the sofa. Clara sat down gingerly, clutching Sam tightly. He stared at me with wide, curious eyes. I sat opposite them, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "I don't know how to say this," Clara began, her voice shaking. "But Robert is Sam's father." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It felt like the room was spinning. I stared at Clara, then at Sam, then back at Clara. It couldn't be true. It just couldn't be. I don't understand, I stammered, my mind reeling. "Robert and we've been married for 25 years. He would never." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I know this is hard to hear, Mrs. Shaw. But it's true. Robert and we met a few years ago. I was working at the diner on the edge of town. He helped me when I was going through a hard time. She paused, taking a shaky breath. I never meant for things to go this far. But then I found out I was pregnant. Robert promised he would take care of us. But he said he couldn't leave you. He said it would ruin his reputation, his career. The silence that followed Clara's revelation was deafening. I felt numb, like I was watching a movie of my own life, but I couldn't press pause. I needed to hear it all, as much as it hurt. Just then, I heard the familiar sound of Robert's car pulling into the driveway. My stomach lurched. He was home early. What was I going to do? Clara's eyes widened in panic. Oh no, she whispered. I can't face him. Not here. Before I could say anything, Robert opened the front door. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw Clara and Sam. The color drained from his face. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Robert, I said, my voice flat. Clara has something to tell you. He swallowed hard, his eyes darting between Clara and me. He knew. He knew that I knew. Meredith, he began, his voice trembling. Please, let me explain. Explain what, Robert? I asked, my voice rising slightly. Explain how you've been living a double life? Explain how you have a son I knew nothing about? He took a step closer, his hand outstretched. Please, Meredith. Don't do this here. Let's talk about this in private. He looked pleadingly at Clara, then back at me. I can explain everything. Clara stood up, pulling Sam close to her. I should go, she said quietly. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. No, Clara, stay, I said. I want you to hear what he has to say. Robert sighed, running a hand through his hair. He looked defeated, his shoulders slumped. All right, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's true. Sam is my son. Clara and we had an affair a few years ago. It was a mistake, Meredith, a terrible mistake. I never meant for it to happen. I love you. I've always loved you. He dropped to his knees, grabbing my hands. Please, Meredith, forgive me. I know I've hurt you. But I promise, it won't happen again. I'll do anything to make things right. Just please, don't leave me. Think about my reputation. Think about my practice. Please, just keep this quiet. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with tears. He was begging. Begging for my silence. Begging for me to protect his perfect little world. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't going to be quiet. I wasn't going to protect him. I was going to make him pay. The decision was swift, almost instinctive. As Robert knelt there, tears streaming down his face, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The years of quiet dinners, the predictable Sundays, the comfortable routine, it all seemed like a carefully constructed facade, a house of cards ready to collapse. And Robert, with his secret life, had just blown it all down. I stood up, pulling my hands away from his grasp. Get up, Robert, I said, my voice cold and steady. You're embarrassing yourself. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with confusion and desperation. Meredith, please. What are you going to do? I'm going to get a divorce, Robert, I said, my voice unwavering. And I'm going to make sure you pay for what you've done. The color drained from his face again. A divorce? But Meredith, think about what that will do to me. To my practice. To my reputation. The scandal. That's exactly the point, Robert, I said, a small smile playing on my lips. You should have thought about that before you decided to have an affair and father a child. You should have thought about the consequences before you betrayed me. I turned to Clara. Thank you for telling me the truth, Clara, I said sincerely. I know that must have been difficult. You and Sam deserve better than this. Clara nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. She picked up Sam and headed towards the door. Goodbye, Mrs. Shaw, she said softly. I hope things work out for you. Goodbye, Clara, I replied. As Clara and Sam left, I turned back to Robert. He was still kneeling on the floor, his face buried in his hands. I felt no sympathy for him. Only anger. And a fierce determination to protect myself and my future. You have 1 week, Robert, I said, my voice sharp. 1 week to pack your things and leave. And then I'm filing for divorce. And believe me, Robert, you won't like what comes next. I turned and walked away, leaving him kneeling on the floor, a broken and defeated man. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult. But I was ready. I was ready to fight. I was ready to take back control of my life. And I was ready to make Robert pay the price for his betrayal. I walked toward the kitchen, feeling strangely empowered. The chicken pot pie could wait. I had a phone call to make. It was time to hire a lawyer. And not just any lawyer. I needed the best, the most ruthless, the one who could get me everything I deserved. The phone felt heavy in my hand as I dialed the number. It was a number I'd hoped I'd never have to call. But there was no other choice. I needed the best, and everyone knew who that was. Brenda Stern's office, a crisp voice answered. I'd like to speak with Brenda Stern, please, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. May I ask who's calling? My name is Meredith Shaw. It's urgent. There was a brief pause. 1 moment, please. A few seconds later, a new voice, sharp and commanding, filled the line. Brenda Stern speaking. What can I do for you, Mrs. Shaw? Brenda Stern was a legend in the state. She was known as the Barracuda for her aggressive tactics and her uncanny ability to win even the most difficult cases. She was expensive, ruthless, and incredibly effective. And she was exactly what I needed. Miss Stern, I began, my husband, Robert Shaw, has been unfaithful. He has a child with another woman. I want a divorce, and I want everything. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then, Brenda Stern chuckled. Everything, you say? I like the sound of that, Mrs. Shaw. Tell me everything. I spent the next hour recounting the events of the day, from Clara's arrival to Robert's tearful confession. I told her about Robert's medical practice, our investments, the vacation home by the lake. I told her about his reputation, his standing in the community, and how desperate he would be to protect it. Brenda Stern listened intently, asking pointed questions and making notes. When I was finished, she spoke. Mrs. Shaw, she said, her voice confident and assured, I think we can work with this. Your husband has made a serious mistake, and we're going to make him pay. I'll need you to gather any financial documents you have, bank statements, investment records, property deeds. Bring them to my office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. And Mrs. Shaw? Yes? Don't worry. You're in good hands now. We're going to get you everything you deserve. This is going to be fun. I hung up the phone, feeling a surge of adrenaline. It was the first time since Clara's knock that I felt like I was back in control. I had a plan. I had a lawyer. And I was ready to fight. The Barracuda was on my side, and Robert didn't stand a chance. The next morning, I arrived at Brenda Stern's office promptly at 9 o'clock. The office was located in a sleek, modern building downtown, a stark contrast to the cozy, traditional feel of Willow Creek. The waiting room was minimalist and stylish, with black leather furniture and abstract art on the walls. It screamed power and success. Brenda Stern's secretary, a young woman with a severe haircut and an even more severe expression, ushered me into her office. Brenda Stern's office was even more impressive than the waiting room. It was large and airy, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. A massive mahogany desk dominated the room, and bookshelves lined the walls, filled with legal texts and awards. Brenda Stern herself was just as formidable as her reputation. She was a tall, imposing woman with short, silver hair and piercing blue eyes. She wore a tailored power suit and exuded an air of confidence and authority. She was the kind of woman who could intimidate you with a single glance. "Mrs. Shaw," she said, her voice brisk and professional, "thank you for coming. Let's get down to business." I handed her the stack of financial documents I had gathered. She examined them carefully, her brow furrowed in concentration. After a few minutes, she looked up at me. "Your husband has done quite well for himself, Mrs. Shaw," she said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "This medical practice is very lucrative. And these investments, impressive. It seems we have quite a bit to work with." "I want it all, Miss Stern," I said, my voice firm. "I want the practice, the investments, the vacation home. I want everything that Robert and I built together. He doesn't deserve it." Brenda Stern nodded, her eyes gleaming. "I understand, Mrs. Shaw. And I assure you, we will do everything in our power to get you what you want. But this won't be easy. Your husband is a respected member of this community. He has a lot of friends and allies. He'll fight us every step of the way." "I'm not afraid, Miss Stern," I said, my chin held high. "I'm ready for a fight." "Good," she said, a predatory glint in her eyes. "Because this is going to be a war. And we're going to win." She leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. "Now, let's talk strategy." She outlined her plan, a meticulous and aggressive approach designed to exploit Robert's weaknesses and maximize my gains. It was brilliant, ruthless, and exactly what I needed. I left her office feeling a mix of fear and excitement. The battle was about to begin. And I had the best weapon in town on my side. The first shot was fired a few days later. Brenda Stern sent Robert a letter, a carefully worded legal document outlining my demands and the evidence she had gathered against him. It was a declaration of war, a clear message that I was not backing down. I wasn't there to witness Robert's reaction, but I could imagine it. The letter would have landed on his desk like a bomb, shattering his carefully constructed facade of respectability. He would have been shocked, horrified, and desperate to contain the damage. A few days later, Brenda Stern called me. "He wants to talk," she said, her voice cool and professional. "He's willing to negotiate." "What are his terms?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "He's not offering much," she said. "He's willing to give you a generous alimony payment and a share of the investments. But he wants to keep the practice and the vacation home. He says they're too important to him." "That's not good enough," I said, my voice firm. "I want everything." "I know, Mrs. Shaw," she said. "And we're going to get it. But we need to play this carefully. We can't push him too hard, or he'll dig in his heels and fight us in court. And that could drag this out for months, even years." "What do you suggest?" I asked. "I suggest we meet with him and his lawyer," she said. "We'll listen to what they have to say, and then we'll make our counteroffer. We'll show them that we're serious, that we're not going to back down. And we'll remind them of what's at stake, his reputation, his career, everything he's worked so hard to build." The meeting was scheduled for the following week at Brenda Stern's office. I was nervous, but I was also determined. I knew that this was my chance to take control of my life and get what I deserved. I spent the days leading up to the meeting preparing myself mentally and emotionally. I practiced my arguments, rehearsed my responses, and reminded myself of everything that Robert had done to me. When the day finally arrived, I was ready. I walked into Brenda Stern's office with my head held high, ready to face my husband and his lawyer. It was time to negotiate. And I was determined to win. I knew Robert would hate that I'd hired Brenda Stern. Everyone did. She was a force to be reckoned with. He had no idea what was coming. Robert arrived at Brenda Stern's office looking pale and drawn. He was accompanied by a lawyer, a nervous-looking man in a rumpled suit who seemed completely out of his depth. Robert avoided my gaze, his eyes fixed on the floor. Brenda Stern wasted no time with pleasantries. "Mr. Shaw," she said, her voice sharp and commanding, "we are here today to discuss the terms of your divorce from Mrs. Shaw. As you know, we have gathered substantial evidence of your infidelity, including proof of your relationship with Ms. Clara and the paternity of her son, Sam." Robert's lawyer stammered, "Ms. Stern, we believe that these matters can be resolved amicably. Mr. Shaw is willing to offer Mrs. Shaw a generous settlement, including alimony and a portion of the marital assets." Brenda Stern raised an eyebrow. "A portion?" "Mr. Henderson, my client is entitled to everything. She is the wronged party in this situation, and she has suffered irreparable harm as a result of your client's actions." Robert finally looked up, his eyes pleading. "Meredith, please," he said, his voice trembling. "Can't we talk about this? Can't we work something out?" I met his gaze, my expression cold and unyielding. "There's nothing to talk about, Robert," I said. "You made your choice. Now you have to live with the consequences." Brenda Stern leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Robert. "Mr. Shaw," she said, her voice low and menacing, "my client is prepared to go to court and expose your infidelity to the entire town of Willow Creek. She is prepared to reveal every detail of your relationship with Ms. Clara and the existence of your illegitimate child. She is prepared to destroy your reputation and your career." Robert's face contorted in horror. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "Oh, but we would, Mr. Shaw," Brenda Stern said, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Unless you are willing to meet my client's demands." She then laid out my terms, each word delivered with icy precision. "My client demands full ownership of the medical practice. She demands full ownership of all investments. She demands full ownership of the vacation home by the lake. She demands everything, Mr. Shaw." In exchange for her silence. Robert stared at Brenda Stern, his face ashen. He looked like he was about to faint. He knew he was trapped. He knew that his carefully constructed world was about to crumble. He looked at me, his eyes filled with desperation. I didn't flinch. I didn't show any emotion. I was done feeling sorry for him. It was his turn to suffer. The price of his silence was everything. And I was determined to collect. He knew that the alternative would be that his secret family would become public knowledge. The town would never look at him the same way again. And his career would be over. The silence in the room was thick and heavy, broken only by the ticking of a clock on the wall. Robert stared at the divorce papers, his hands trembling. He knew he was cornered. He knew that Brenda Stern was not bluffing. He knew that if he didn't sign those papers, his entire life would be ruined. His lawyer, Mr. Henderson, whispered something in his ear, but Robert waved him away. He was beyond advice. He was beyond reason. He was simply trying to survive. Finally, with a heavy sigh, Robert picked up the pen. His hand shook as he signed his name to each page of the divorce papers. It was the end of his marriage, the end of his career, the end of everything he had worked so hard to build. When he was finished, he dropped the pen on the table and slumped back in his chair, defeated. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger, resentment, and despair. I met his gaze, my expression still cold and unyielding. I felt no pity for him. He had made his choices, and now he was paying the price. Brenda Stern gathered the signed divorce papers and smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Shaw," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You have made the right decision." Robert didn't say a word. He simply stood up and walked out of the office, his lawyer trailing behind him. I watched him go, feeling a strange sense of emptiness. I had won. I had gotten everything I wanted. But somehow, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a loss. A few weeks later, the divorce was finalized. I was now the sole owner of the medical practice, the investments, and the vacation home by the lake. Robert was left with nothing but the clothes on his back and a tarnished reputation. He moved into a small apartment on the other side of town and continued to practice medicine, but his life was never the same. The town whispered about him. They knew what he'd done. I tried to find satisfaction in my newfound wealth and independence, but it was difficult. The price of my silence had been high, both for Robert and for me. I had destroyed his life, but I had also destroyed something inside myself. The victory felt hollow. The silence felt deafening. It was over. I had won. But what had I really won? Robert was running his practice, but barely making ends meet. He had to sell his house to pay off debts. His life was a shadow of what it once was. And it was all because of me. I'd wanted to make him pay, and I had. But now that he was paying, it didn't feel as good as I thought it would. Life after the divorce was strange. I was a wealthy woman, for the first time in my life. I had the medical practice, which I hired a manager to run, since I had no medical experience. I had the investments, which I entrusted to a financial advisor. And I had the vacation home by the lake. I spent that summer at the lake house, trying to find peace and solace in the familiar surroundings. I swam in the lake, read books on the porch, and watched the sunset over the water. It was beautiful, serene, and utterly lonely. I tried to fill the void in my life with activities. I volunteered even more at the library. I took art classes. I joined a book club. I even tried online dating, but the dates were awkward and unfulfilling. It seemed that every man I met was either intimidated by my wealth or only interested in it. Managing the medical practice was challenging. I had to learn a whole new industry, deal with employees, and make difficult decisions. But I was determined to make it work. It was Robert's legacy, and I didn't want to see it fail. I hired a young, energetic doctor to take over Robert's practice, and she quickly gained the trust and respect of the community. She reminded me of Robert when he was younger, full of passion and dedication. It stung a little to see her thriving in what had been his world. Sometimes, I would drive past Robert's small apartment on the other side of town. I would see him walking to work, his shoulders slumped, his face etched with sadness. I knew that I had ruined his life, and that knowledge weighed heavily on me. One day, I saw him at the grocery store. He looked older, thinner, and more tired than I had ever seen him. He was buying a single can of soup and a loaf of bread. I wanted to say something to him, to offer him help, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I simply turned and walked away, feeling a pang of guilt and regret. I had achieved my goal. I had made Robert pay for his betrayal. But in the process, I had also lost something precious, my sense of self, my sense of purpose, my sense of hope. I was a wealthy woman, but I was also a lonely and unhappy one. The vacation home, once a symbol of our shared life, now felt like a cold and empty reminder of what I had lost. I spent my days surrounded by luxury, but my nights were filled with regret. I was free, but I wasn't happy. It was a high price to pay for silence. And all the while, the whispers continued. The town hadn't forgotten. The legend of the ruthless divorce settlement was growing, shaping how people viewed me. I was no longer just Meredith Shaw. I was Meredith Shaw, the woman who took everything. The woman who toppled the good doctor. The woman who became a local legend. The small town of Willow Creek thrived on gossip. And the divorce of Meredith and Robert Shaw was the juiciest piece of gossip they'd had in years. The story spread like wildfire, fueled by speculation, exaggeration, and a healthy dose of small-town drama. At first, people were shocked. Robert Shaw, the beloved town doctor, the pillar of the community, the man who could do no wrong? It was unbelievable. But then, as the details of the affair and the secret family emerged, the shock turned to outrage. How could Robert have betrayed Meredith like that? How could he have lived a double life for so long? But the outrage soon shifted to fascination, and then to a grudging admiration for Meredith. She had been wronged, yes, but she hadn't let Robert get away with it. She had fought back, and she had won. She had taken him for everything he had. The town was divided. Some people sided with Robert, arguing that he was a good man who had made a mistake. They whispered about Meredith's ruthlessness, her greed, her cold-heartedness. They said that she had gone too far, that she had destroyed a good man's life. Others sided with Meredith, arguing that she had every right to take what was rightfully hers. They said that Robert had deserved everything he got, that he had brought it all on himself. They admired her strength, her courage, her determination. They said that she had stood up for herself and for all the women who had been wronged by their husbands. The truth, of course, was somewhere in the middle. Robert was not a monster, but he had made a terrible mistake. And Meredith was not a saint, but she had been deeply hurt and betrayed. The divorce settlement was not a simple case of good versus evil. It was a complex and messy situation with no easy answers. But in Willow Creek, nuance was a luxury they couldn't afford. They needed a story, a narrative, a clear-cut case of right and wrong. And so, the legend of Meredith Shaw, the woman who took everything, was born. She became a symbol of female empowerment, a cautionary tale, a figure of both admiration and fear. People whispered about her behind her back, but they were also careful to be polite to her face. They knew that she was a force to be reckoned with. They knew that she had the power to destroy lives. And so, Meredith lived her life in Willow Creek, surrounded by wealth and independence, but also by gossip and judgment. She was a local legend, a figure of fascination and fear. She had gotten what she wanted, but she had also paid a price. A price that was far higher than money. The town never forgot what happened, and neither did she. The whispers followed her everywhere. Did you hear what Meredith Shaw did to Robert? It was a question that echoed through the town for years to come. Robert continued to practice medicine in Willow Creek, but his life was irrevocably changed. He rented a small office space above the hardware store and struggled to rebuild his practice. Many of his former patients had left him, either out of loyalty to Meredith or out of disapproval of his actions. He saw fewer patients, worked longer hours, and earned less money. He was a shadow of his former self. The respect he had once commanded in the community was gone. People still greeted him politely, but their eyes held a hint of judgment, a silent acknowledgement of his transgression. He was no longer the beloved town doctor. He was simply Robert Shaw, the man who had cheated on his wife and fathered a child with another woman. He tried to keep a low profile, avoiding social gatherings and public events. He spent most of his time at his office or at his small apartment, alone with his thoughts and regrets. He missed Meredith, he missed their comfortable life, he missed the respect and admiration of the community. He missed everything that he had lost. He continued to support Clara and Sam, providing them with financial assistance whenever he could. He saw Sam regularly, sneaking visits in parks and playgrounds, careful to avoid being seen by anyone who knew him. He loved Sam deeply, but he knew that he could never be a real father to him. His secret life had cost him everything, including his relationship with his son. One day, I saw Robert at the hospital. He was visiting a patient, an elderly woman who had been a longtime friend of both of us. He looked tired and worn, but he was still kind and compassionate. He still had the gentle bedside manner that had made him such a beloved doctor. I realized that despite everything, he was still a good man at heart. He had made a terrible mistake, but he was not a monster. He was simply a flawed human being, struggling to live with the consequences of his actions. He saw me, too. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I saw a flicker of sadness and regret in his gaze. He nodded his head in acknowledgement, then turned and walked away. It was the last time I ever saw him. Robert lived the rest of his life in Willow Creek, a tarnished figure, a constant reminder of the scandal that had rocked the town. He continued to practice medicine, providing care to those who were willing to trust him. He lived with the consequences of his actions, bearing the weight of his guilt and regret. He was a local legend, but not in the way he had ever imagined. He was the cautionary tale, the story whispered in hushed tones, the reminder that even the most respected members of the community are capable of making terrible mistakes. And that those mistakes can have lasting and devastating consequences. And that, perhaps, was the highest price of all. Years have passed since the divorce. The whispers in Willow Creek have faded, but the legend of Meredith Shaw, the woman who took everything, still lingers. I am older now, perhaps wiser. I have learned a lot about myself, about Robert, and about the complexities of life. I often reflect on the events that unfolded, the choices that I made, and the consequences that followed. Was I justified in my actions? Did I go too far? Did I achieve justice, or simply inflict pain? I still believe that Robert deserved to pay for his betrayal. He had lied to me, he had broken his vows, and he had jeopardized my future. I had every right to protect myself and to demand compensation for the harm that he had caused. But I also recognize that my actions had a ripple effect, impacting not only Robert but also Clara and Sam, and even the community of Willow Creek. I had created a scandal that had divided the town and tarnished the reputation of a man who had once been deeply respected. I am not sure that I am happy. I have wealth and independence, but I lack companionship and connection. I have achieved security, but I have sacrificed intimacy. I have won the battle, but I have lost the war. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I had made different choices. What if I had forgiven Robert? What if I had tried to work things out? What if I had chosen compassion over revenge? But then I remember Clara standing on my doorstep, holding Sam in her arms, and I know that there was no other choice. Robert had made his decision, and I had to make mine. I had to protect myself, and I had to take control of my life. I am not proud of everything that I did. I regret the pain that I caused, both to Robert and to myself. But I do not regret standing up for myself. I do not regret refusing to be a victim. I do not regret taking control of my own destiny. I am Meredith Shaw, the woman who took everything. And I am also Meredith Shaw, the woman who survived. I am a local legend, a cautionary tale, a symbol of both strength and regret. And I am finally at peace with who I am and what I have done. The silence still lingers, but it no longer deafens. It is simply a part of my story, a reminder of the choices that I made and the price that I paid. It's a reminder that even in a small town, secrets can have big consequences. And that sometimes, the price of silence is higher than you can imagine. But at least, I am secure. And perhaps, that is enough. I occasionally wondered about Clara and Sam. They had disappeared from Willow Creek shortly after the divorce, moving to a nearby town. I never saw them again, but I heard whispers. The whispers said that Robert was still helping them, secretly providing them with financial support. He would send Clara money anonymously, through a third party, careful to avoid any direct contact that could jeopardize his already fragile reputation. He would visit Sam whenever he could, attending his school plays and soccer games, always from a distance, always hidden in the shadows. I never confronted Robert about it. I knew that it was his way of atoning for his sins, of trying to make amends for the harm that he had caused. And I also knew that it was none of my business. I had taken everything that he had, but I couldn't control his actions. One day, I received a letter in the mail. It was unsigned, but I knew who it was from. Inside, there was a photograph of Sam. He was older now, about 10 years old. He had Robert's eyes and Robert's smile. He looked happy and healthy. On the back of the photograph, there was a single sentence, "Thank you." I knew that the letter was from Clara. It was her way of acknowledging Robert's help, her way of expressing her gratitude. It was also her way of telling me that they were doing okay, that they had survived the scandal and the divorce. I kept the photograph. It was a reminder that even in the midst of betrayal and heartbreak, there can be moments of grace and forgiveness. It was a reminder that even the most broken relationships can be mended, at least in part. I never saw Clara or Sam again, but I often thought about them. I hoped that they were happy, that they had found peace. I hoped that Sam knew that his father loved him, even if he couldn't be a part of his life. And I hoped that Robert had found some measure of redemption, some sense of purpose in his secret acts of kindness. He may have been a flawed man, but he was also a man who was trying to do the right thing, even when it was difficult. And perhaps, that was all that mattered. The story of Clara and Sam, though a footnote in my own drama, was a reminder that life goes on, even after the most devastating events. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for a brighter future. A future that, for them, didn't involve me. A future that, for Robert, involved living with the secret of his past. And for me, a future of solitude, security, and the lingering whispers of Willow Creek. Even now, years later, the question still lingers in the back of my mind: did I do the right thing? Was the price of my silence too high? Did I achieve justice, or simply inflict unnecessary pain? There are days when I am convinced that I made the only possible choice. Robert had betrayed me, he had lied to me, and he had jeopardized my future. I had every right to protect myself and to demand compensation for the harm that he had caused. On those days, I feel a sense of satisfaction, a sense of vindication. But there are other days when I am filled with doubt and regret. I see Robert's face in my mind, his eyes filled with sadness and despair. I remember the good times we shared, the years of companionship and connection. I wonder if I could have forgiven him, if I could have found a way to move forward. I know that forgiveness is not always easy, and that sometimes it is not even possible. But I also know that holding on to anger and resentment can be just as damaging. I wonder if I have allowed my anger to consume me, to define me. I will never know for sure if I made the right decision. There is no way to rewind time, to undo the past. All I can do is live with the consequences of my actions and try to learn from my mistakes. Perhaps the most important lesson that I have learned is that there are no easy answers in life. Every choice has a price, and every action has a consequence. We can only do our best to make the right decisions, and then we must accept the results, whatever they may be. The legend of Meredith Shaw, the woman who took everything, will likely continue to be told in Willow Creek for many years to come. But I hope that one day, people will also remember that I was a woman who was hurt, a woman who was betrayed, and a woman who was simply trying to survive. And perhaps, that is a more accurate and more compassionate way to remember my story. A story that is not just about revenge and ruthlessness, but also about loss, regret, and the enduring power of the human spirit. A spirit that can endure even the most devastating betrayals, and find a way to move forward, even when the path ahead is uncertain. I am still not sure if I am happy. But I am secure. And I am at peace. And perhaps, that is enough. Perhaps, that is all that any of us can hope for in this life. To find a measure of peace, a measure of security, and a measure of acceptance. Even when the questions still linger, and the answers remain elusive. Did I do the right thing? I honestly don't know. But I did what I thought I had to do. And I can live with that. Can you? And so, the divorce settlement became a local legend in Willow Creek. It was a story that was told and retold, embellished and exaggerated, with each passing year. It was a story about betrayal, revenge, and the high price of silence. It was a cautionary tale, whispered in hushed tones, warning young wives to be careful, to be vigilant, to protect themselves from the possibility of infidelity. It was a reminder that even the most respected members of the community are capable of making terrible mistakes. And that those mistakes can have lasting and devastating consequences. It was also a story about female empowerment, about a woman who had been wronged and who had refused to be a victim. It was a story about strength, courage, and the determination to take control of one's own destiny. The legend of Meredith Shaw, the woman who took everything, became a part of the fabric of Willow Creek. It was a story that shaped the town's identity, its values, and its sense of itself. And even now, years later, the legend persists. It is a story that is still being told, still being debated, still being analyzed. It is a story that continues to resonate with people, to provoke questions, and to challenge assumptions. I am not sure what the future holds for me. I may stay in Willow Creek, surrounded by my wealth and my memories. Or I may leave, seeking a fresh start in a new place. But wherever I go, I will always carry the legend with me. It is a part of who I am, a part of my story. It is a reminder of the choices that I made, the price that I paid, and the lessons that I learned. And perhaps, that is the most important thing of all. To learn from our mistakes, to grow from our experiences, and to carry our stories with us, wherever we go. The divorce settlement became more than just a legal agreement. It became a part of the town's history, a symbol of a time when secrets were revealed, lives were shattered, and a new legend was born. A legend that would be whispered for generations, a reminder that even in a small town, the choices we make can have far-reaching consequences. The legend of Meredith Shaw, and the price of silence, would forever be etched in the collective memory of Willow Creek. It's a legend that serves as a reminder that even seemingly quiet lives can hold extraordinary secrets and that the pursuit of justice can come at a cost far greater than money. It's a legend that, even now, makes people pause and wonder, what would I have done? Meredith's story teaches us that justice and vengeance wear the same mask, until you realize one chains you to the past while the other sets you free. She clawed back every penny, every property, every shred of Robert's dignity. Only to discover too late that the real cost was her own peace. So ask yourself, when the gavel falls and the crowd cheers, who truly pays the price, the broken man before you, or the woman you became to break him?